Thank you, Phyllis. Phyllis told me she never hands the mic to anybody, so this is an honor just getting the mic this morning. First off, this is a great crowd. I'm very happy to see so many new faces and old faces and former faces and alumni that have come back to Blacksburg for our 30th anniversary. So I really want to say thank you to all of you for coming a long way. Some of you I know came a very long way, all the way from California and other places. Yep. But anyway, we're going to kick off today's event with a presentation by Jack Carroll. So for those of you who do not know, Jack Carroll joined Virginia Tech in 1994 as the head of the Department of Computer Science. Mary Beth Rosen also joined along with him. And then in 1995, you guys established the Center for Human-Computer Interaction, right? And here we are today celebrating 30 years. So if you all can give a round of applause for Jack. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Ryan. When Ryan asked me to do this, I chose the topic of interdisciplinarity because I thought it was appropriate, which it is. But it's also vast and amorphous. It leads in a lot of directions, and so I easily wrote an abstract for the talk, but then I started to work on the talk after the papers deadline, and it went in a lot of directions, and so they say that the less certain you are of what you're going to say or should say, the more likely you are to write a script and read it, which is what I'm going to do. But I should point out this is also interdisciplinary, because if I were a philosopher, this would be normal. But I'm not a philosopher, but I'm reaching out. So the shape of this talk is how I want to talk a little bit about interdisciplinarity. And everything, as I said, is a vast topic, and this will be not as vast when I talk about what interdisciplinarity is. Then I want to talk about its importance to HCI in the past, and then finally in the future. So here I go. Gardner's influential conceptualization of interdisciplinarity distinguishes between strong and weak cases. In weak interdisciplinarity, diverse actors collaborate and gain deeper insights, but are not explicitly pursuing the goal of articulating new concepts and methods. In strong interdisciplinarity, articulating a higher level science is the primary collaborative goal. This definitional approach prizes normative and somewhat grandiose views of inquiry. I encountered this distinction in the heydays of cognitive science. So did Gardner. With the goal was integrating theory spanning about 6 or 8 disciplines, and HCI grew out of this context. 40 years later, most cognitive scientists agree the objective of strong interdisciplinarity has failed. Some have concluded it was never the right thing to try to do in the first place. The actual interdisciplinarity of cognitive science is more of the weak variety, and it's more common in general. And it's also more typically called multidisciplinarity. Colleagues become more aware of another's expertise, professional activity, and contributions, and become more respectful of one another. And there's nothing wrong with multidisciplinarity. An alternative view of interdisciplinarity draws on the sociology of science, meaning it's grounded not in normative goals about things that should be achieved, but in the actual collaboration dynamics that constitute the work activity. I think this is a possible route toward a view of interdisciplinarity that's more ambitious than mere multidisciplinarity, but more realistic and perhaps more useful than Gardner's strong interdisciplinarity. And I will define socially grounded interdisciplinarity as a committed participation in an intellectually diverse joint endeavor that regularly entails mutual learning and responsibility. And this should sound familiar to anybody here from HCI because it's basically the definition of participatory design. But it's reframed for the domain of managing intellectual work. In this view, interdisciplinarity is recognized in the behavior and experience of actors, people who understand and value the same knowledge and practices tend to feel greater efficacy and trust as they interact with colleagues. This is part of where disciplines come from. It's comfortable to work with people who agree with your assumptions, people with whom you share a lot of common ground. This is part of why disciplines persist, and of course we know from Kuhn and other people, they persist even when they limit members to groupthink through including plainly wrong paradigmatic assumptions. However, as it is more comfortable to share common ground, it could be more stimulating, engaging, and creative to encounter others with whom we share less common ground, but who can help us experience growth and insight, that is, can help us acquire new knowledge and skills and understand and address new ways. Indeed, this is the creative path to efficacy and trust in that it allows people to feel the efficacy of creating trust itself, which you don't have to do in a discipline, perhaps to a fault. Still, it must be acknowledged that interdisciplinarity is hard. Any work arrangement that requires people to learn, especially to learn about what is important to others, yet quite possibly inscrutable to them, is going to be a serious challenge. The expectation of shared responsibility, that is shared authority and shared accountability, makes it also high difficulty with high stakes, which is a difficult kind of activity for people to engage in. Okay, so that's an opposition. The interdisciplinarity of HCI. HCI was initially formed from threads of ongoing work in computer science, chiefly software engineering and graphics, and psychology, human factors, evaluation methods and models, information processing models and theories of perception, and skill performance, and cognitive models of learning and memory. It's no surprise that these two disciplines, psychology and computer science, are long-term partners in the interdisciplinarity of HCI. And indeed, throughout the 70s, before HCI was acknowledged or even consistently named, pioneers organized local technical meetings, such as the Software Psychology Society in Washington, D.C., clearly signaling interdisciplinary aspirations. March 1982 is generally pointed to as the birth of HCI, though, as I mentioned, it had been going on for about 10 years. The National Bureau of Standards, which is now the National Institute of Standards and Technology, hosted a conference on human factors in computer systems in Gaithersburg, Maryland. It attracted, and this is like from never having a national meeting or international meeting before, 100 papers and 1,000 participants, which surprised a lot of people. Many of the attendees came from industry and government, who felt something important was coming. And also attending were leaders from outside the United States. A U.S. National Academy of Science report included a detailed summary of the Gaithersburg meeting, enumerating acute needs and opportunities regarding methodologies to evaluate what is meant by ease of use, which became a watchword for the field, alternative input devices, speech recognition and production applications, better models and analyses of user interactions, better designs for training and reference information, and an understanding of how differences in system design can accommodate differences in people. And, you know, it's interesting to read a list like that from 1983 was the date of the report, since a lot of those things are still challenges today. It concluded that, and I quote, "This level of interest foretells a heavy demand for scientific knowledge that has yet to be created." The report specifically described the opportunity and importance of interdisciplinary approaches. Again, quoting from this report, "A research program undertaken by a multidisciplinary group at Virginia Polytechnic Institute and State University by Williges and Eric, sponsored by the Office of Naval Research, is attempting to develop principles of effective human-computer interaction, including establishment of a user's model of command languages. This research is interdisciplinary and programmatic in nature." So again, that's this 1983 report, and calling out some people that many of us know. And because I'm speaking to a group that may have special interest in Hokies, I'll quote one quote more. The NAS report noted that, quoting, "Although a number of industrial laboratories are supporting proprietary work," meaning we don't know what they're doing, "there is only one major funded collaborative effort between computer science and human factors specialists, that at Virginia Polytechnic Institute and State University." Interesting. I mean, they knew it was very important. They only found one example. And I guess it wasn't exactly here, since this didn't exist, but somewhere around here. The early formation of HCI in the run-up to and including the Gaithersburg event shows that from the earliest point there was a recognition that interdisciplinarity was and would be important. The Gaithersburg Conference surprised many in revealing a large interest group and technical agenda, including the existence of, but also the need for more than one case of interdisciplinary work. And then in December 1983, ACM's conference on human factors in computing systems, also known as CHI, was held in Boston. And a lot of that meeting was focused on talking about, and in some cases demonstrating, the importance of an interdisciplinary approach to HCI. The theme of interdisciplinarity remains central in HCI, and in fact became a specific intentional goal in steering its development in the CHI conference through the 1980s. When I became the program co-chair for the 1987 CHI conference, I had a specific meeting with Stuart Card, who had been the program chair for the 1986 conference, to plan what we needed to do to facilitate interactions and collaboration between cognitive scientists and computer scientists. And because Stu is such an analytical person, this was not a matter of eyeballing things. It involved looking at the accepted papers in recent CHI conferences, identifying balance and imbalance, so that the 1987 conference could rebalance through messaging about the conference and appointments to the program committee. We decided that year, just as a footnote, that computer science needed a boost. Although psychology and computer science have remained critical to the interdisciplinarity of HCI, the disciplinary space of HCI has evolved. Indeed, the breadth of new constituents and new opportunities for interdisciplinarity never stopped growing in the HCI community. I'm afraid I may switch between CHI and HCI randomly. Part of this was the progression of new disciplinary groups joining the CHI area. In the latter 1980s, colleagues from anthropology who do field work in ethnography, sociology, people who worked on collaboration, group work and organizations, and design became much more visible as coherent parts of the community and more impactful to the overall HCI community. And there was also a good bit of refactoring. For example, when you say computer science or psychology, which are disciplines, they contain disciplines as well. So human factors and cognitive psychology aren't the same thing, but they're in the same larger discipline. So now I want to talk more about where interdisciplinarity is going. As the CHI conference continued to identify and articulate new areas, attention focused on making these areas more visible and more coherently influential in CHI. So in 1988, the SIG-CHI group initiated the Conference on Computer-Supported Cooperative Work and the Conference on User Interface Software and Technology. Through the years, about 30 specialty conferences have been launched, and I think 2 or 3 of them died, but there's just quite a few of them in existence. The concept of specialty conference is, I think, turned out to be a surprising and creative idea that addressed several goals at once. The overall CHI conference has steadily grown. So in 1983, the first conference, had around 900 attendees, but the last one, this spring, had 5,300. So many of the things that you can do with a 900-person conference are very different with over 5,000 people. In a larger conference, a sub-community, especially an emerging sub-community, is fighting both inertia and randomness to shape itself. Specialty conferences help to scaffold interdisciplinarity by providing support for members to organize and participate in events they choose and shape. Because the specialty conferences are smaller and address more focused topics, attendees can engage with one another more intensively and may be more likely to pursue collaborations, developing and strengthening new areas, new sub-areas, let's say. This, in turn, expands and develops the overall CHI area from the bottom up, eventually making reciprocal cross-specialty collaborations more possible as well. The nature of specialty conferences and their communities has changed through the years. And this, I should say, is partly my spin on these things. The first two communities that I mentioned from 1988 were rather disciplinary. CSCW was the social science community, and WIST, UIST, was the software tools community. I was part of another group formation process, the Designing Interactive Systems, DIS, in 1990. It was the fifth specialty conference. My recollection is that our proposal was a response to increasing activity in specific areas of design research, including design rationale and design methods, and a sense that we could benefit from a more focused forum. This was also a disciplinary community, and through it, design research became stronger, but also more diverse, both within the DIS community and within the overall CHI community. In 2016, the DIS conference became an annual meeting. Most of the specialty conferences start being biannual, so that's sort of a mark of stability and possible permanence. These communities are very important since they show how the disciplinary model of the overall HCI community has grown and differentiated from the original concept of combining psychology and computer science to create HCI. But the disciplinary model is limited by the number of communities like social science, software tools, and design that exist already and can be appropriated as a growth area for HCI. There has been a trend over time, I think, for communities and their specialty conferences to decompose the space of HCI into relatively more emergent and dynamic problem domains, as opposed to pre-existing disciplines, which we've run out of. Examples include eye tracking, vehicular applications, tangible and embedded interaction, ubiquitous computing, interactive services and spaces, and sustainable societies. Those are all current or recently founded specialty conferences. The CHI 2030 Vision Task Force document characterizes communities as persistent, easy to create, and potentially overlapping. And I call this out because easy to create and potentially overlapping really doesn't fit well the traditional concept of disciplines. But perhaps after decades of learning and leveraging conventional interdisciplinarity, HCI is growing its own subdisciplinary views and sounding boards based on current tools, technologies, applications, and methods, which the specialty conferences are examples of. Specialty conferences can support rethinking the focus of interdisciplinarity in CHI from acknowledgement and inclusion and partnership with existing intellectual foundations, disciplines, to an open-ended call for new emphases, transformational problems, and alternative frameworks. I'm not asserting that this is why SIG-CHI hosted specialty conferences or where they came from. In fact, it's not that. As far as I can see, the most direct manipulation has more to do with managing the growth of CHI that I alluded to, and at the same time trying to empower more members. Uh-oh. I am getting to the end. I'm sorry. I should have practiced this more. But let me see where I am now. Even more time. Managing the growth of CHI and empowering more of its members. But the specialty conferences and their emerging communities can afford something beyond this, a transformation of interdisciplinarity into something new and edgy that pushes HCI and the CHI community beyond combining and leveraging existing intellectual threads to identifying new threads and new things to weave with new threads. So I'm wrapping up now, late, but it did happen. To start wrapping up this essay, it's even in the essay, I returned to my own earliest days of interdisciplinary science. In 1976, I earned a PhD in psycholinguistics, an interdisciplinary part of cognitive science that sought to leverage psychology and linguistics. This movement was caused by Chomsky's innovations in transformational generative grammar in the 1960s, which he characterized as cognitive theory, and which received a lot of attention during the emergence of cognitive science. At that time, linguistics provided very detailed grammatical models to motivate and guide our psychological experiments. But with few exceptions, our work on language perception and learning did not have much effect on linguistics. And I admit I drank the Kool-Aid. At this time in my life, I worked as hard as I could to make this, to realize this as interdisciplinary science. I published in linguistics through the 1970s. I did a postdoc with Chomsky. But looking back, it was determined from the start that this would come to little with respect to particularly the kind of interdisciplinary proposition that Gardner raised. Chomsky's important cognitive performance distinction, in fact, which framed linguistics at the time, literally defined psychology as out of scope for strong interdisciplinarity. But also in the sense of socially grounded interdisciplinarity that I defined earlier, psycholinguistics was never reciprocal. The linguists had no stake in it. The original interdisciplinary axis of HCI was the two disciplines that articulated an authentic and shared vision that neither could achieve alone. Getting to that point was a significant, recognizing that you're at that point is a significant step. Perhaps in part because of the shortcomings for interdisciplinary cognitive science, HCI intentionally cultivated its own interdisciplinarity for the next couple decades, as in the example Stu heard. Really to the point where everybody who attended early Chi conferences knew one thing, that HCI was interdisciplinary and that was very important. I think the underlying causal factor in the difference between the trajectory of HCI and of science is that HCI is fundamentally an applied area. Everyone in this room remembers the ancient mantras of usability, which in fact turned out to be much more complicated than its 1980s version, and which also turned out to be only the first of a series of significant applied objectives in HCI. One of the inherent advantages of being applied is that objectives are concrete and proximal. Feedback about what is achieved and what is not achieved can come quickly. Both success and failure can be very obvious. HCI became hugely visible not because it was interdisciplinary per se, but because it was hugely successful in transforming and developing computing with respect to concrete and proximal objectives. Interdisciplinary in more basic areas of inquiry is often ambitious but quite vague. Thus, Gardner's concept of strong interdisciplinarity requires identifying novel concepts and methods that transform and integrate existing disciplines. I called this grandiose. It's also a bit positivistic. It is a further downside that it takes a long time to realize that it isn't going to work. The comprehensive literature reviews for cognitive science that draw this unfortunate conclusion are published in the 2020s. To continue this aside, actually I won't do that because I'm late. The most exciting implications of this discussion, of course, are for the future. HCI people are already disciplinary hybrids. The classic scenario of pure psychologists and computer scientists forming effective interdisciplinary bonds was real and important, but it's not so central as it was in the 80s. I was impressed by the CHI 2030 task force document and the concept of now repurposing specialty conferences and their communities to play a role of systematically challenging and reshuffling our visions and expectations about the intellectual layout of HCI. I really like the concept that specialty groups within HCI can and should provide action-oriented guidance and proposals to the larger community. The task force vision relies substantially on these communities to advance specific research and practices and to organize subcommittees that curate and select content for presentation at the CHI conference. Such engagement is good for them, and it's good for HCI generally. Looking back, this is actually what specialty conferences always have done for the CHI group. If you think of CSCW, WIST, and DIS, examples I mentioned before, it's actually how they functioned. It just wasn't officially announced. The fact that we might run out of relatively established disciplinary perspectives to mix into future versions of HCI may not be all that important to continuing to be an interdisciplinary project. What is critical is that we continue being serious about exploring and incorporating new ideas and perspectives and leveraging new synergies. HCI was born disciplinary, and it's thrived by expanding its interdisciplinary foundation, and this should be our continuing mission. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
I see that I was really, really off.
That's okay.
I'm sorry.
No problem.
Yeah.
I do want to please continue the please continue conversations, but we're gonna we won't do questions this morning. But I do have some announcements from Ryan for your next steps for the day to keep everybody on schedule. Thank you again for sharing.
You're very welcome.
Thanks, Jack. All right, yeah, so just want to make sure everybody knows what's going on today. So at this point in the day, we're going to head over to the Center for the Arts. We have some exciting exhibits and demonstrations over there. For those of you who have RSVP'd, we have a nice luncheon followed by an award ceremony. We will then head over to Gilbert Place at 1 p.m. Lots of our labs there are giving demonstrations and presentations there as well. Then Doug Bowman, wherever Doug is, Doug will moderate a panel with Stacy, Yang, Yan, and Cheryl. So thanks to all the panelists. And then we have kind of split demos at Whittemore Hall and also at the Visionarium, thanks to Nick if he's here. And then this afternoon, assuming they don't cancel, is supposed to be Oktoberfest at Eastern Divide. And so we recommend that everybody go there and socialize. But there is no host. CHCI is not paying for anything, just so you know. Now, for those of you who may be in need of transportation, Justin Carabo in the back is our transportation chair. He's literally in the chair of the shuttle van, and he will be shuttling around those in need. So if you need transportation to the next location, do please see Justin in the back. Justin, can you raise your hand really high? So for those of you who may need transportation, do please see Justin. We have a 12-passenger van, okay? Thank you all. I'd love to engage with all of you throughout the day.